Mixed Media is a weekly live podcast featuring hot takes in the fields of gaming, music, media, films, TV, 3D modeling, etc. We like talking about art, and the reason we like talking about art is because we believe that talking about art keeps it relevant and alive in the culture. So yeah, without further ado, I'll introduce myself. My name is Irving. I am the founder of Ariella Productions. I'm a filmmaker, but I also do a lot of stuff in media, like just entering the esports space right now. And Daniel, who are you?
All right. Yeah. Hi, my name is Daniel Matsumoto. I am a student, and that is all you need to know. I'm kidding. I am a DP out here in Los Angeles. I'm currently attending USC's Master's in Film and Television Production, and I have worked with Irving on a few projects back in our undergrad years as a DP. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've known Daniel for a long time. Now, Ben is not here yet, but he'll be joining us later. We'll see about that. We'll see if we can manage the tech for that.
Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And my brother Nathan is out today because he's got like 3 midterms in a week, and as you guys can imagine, that is rough, and so he's going to take a break on that.
Yeah, good luck, Nathan.
Yeah, exactly. We're wishing him luck. So yeah, the cool thing, as you can see, we've got a little bit of a new look. It's a little bit fancier right now. It's not as basic is the best way I could put it. And that's because I put a little bit of work into this. So the best thing that you can do for me to keep encouraging me to improve this stream is to go to ariella.co/mixedmedia. It's over there on the whiteboard. Wow, I can't point. It's somewhere over there. Opposite way, yeah. It's ariella.co/mixedmedia, and there you can find places to follow us. And that, more important than anything, following us on Instagram and subscribing if you're on YouTube and following if you're on Twitch. Now, I don't know if anyone's watching right now at all, but if you're watching this after we're live, if you're watching this later, you're probably watching it on Sunday. And you're watching on Sunday because I have to do some post work to clean it up and et cetera, and I take down the live stream entirely. But you will be able to find the live stream the same day, later tonight. This link to this live stream will be on a website called Locals. It's essentially Patreon, except I like it better, so I'm using Locals. So you can go to locals.com. There for free, you can make an account, join the community. You don't have to be a paid subscriber or anything like that. I know we've got no one, so we don't have the right to ask for money or anything like that. But there you'll be able to find a link to this stream, which will go unlisted after we go live. And if you missed it or you're halfway through, or next time that you can't be here at 7 p.m., you can always go to Locals, and the link will be dropped there to the unrefined version of the stream. We just want people in that community so that we can chat and talk about art and debate and whatever. And we'll worry about the money later because we just want to have fun for now. So that's that. And what have you been up to, Daniel? What are you currently doing in your life?
I am currently hiding in my room from a horrifying and deadly pandemic that's outside that window. But more so than that, I've been mostly taking classes in a variety of fields, trying to sort of widen my skill set from just camera stuff. That's what I do. So I've just mostly been spending my time trying to learn some new things in this time where I don't want to go out that door.
Yeah, and since last week, I don't know if I've done anything except for try to improve this stream and work on my website, which is what I said last time. The news from last time is that I didn't break my camera. My camera decided to break for my real estate prospects. So I was just planning to roll that out, and that's when my camera decided that it was going to go kaput. So I'm probably going to have to send that over, maybe wait a month, who knows, get it back. I don't know what's going to happen. But that's been my week. So slogging on my website and my camera breaking. So
that's my least favorite kind of week, when cameras break.
yeah. Never mind that website design is not my favorite thing, and it's very tedious. So yeah.
We're not sponsored by any website creation tools, are we?
No sponsors. But
Zack,
hey,
can't say
if you are Wix, because I use Wix, then hey, hit me up and I'll say good things. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so anybody else, and you're interested in sponsoring,
yeah,
just move an entire website real quick, casual.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's going to be a little bit hard for me to monitor chats and things like that. I know we've had random people popping in on some of our prior live streams, and we had some cool people commenting, because the person who usually monitors chat is Nathan, and he is away. So we will try our best to pay attention and, interact with you guys, because that's kind of the advantage of doing a live podcast, right? Like, I mean, podcasts are podcasts. You listen to them later. You listen to them in your car. But like a live podcast is cool because you can become part of the podcast, which I think is pretty neat. So, yeah. But today we've got two cool topics for now. And if Ben comes along, we'll have three topics. My topic that I'll be talking about from the sort of general art perspective, because I like thinking about art and what art is, how we do art in society, how it relates to culture. So I didn't really have any hot takes on anything happening, in the immediate term that I felt comfortable talking about. So I decided to talk about art in the free market. And I'm going to be defending capitalism, the evils of capitalism. No, but I'm going to be defending the position that the arts need capitalism, or at least a version of it. Obviously, there are very few things in life that are absolutes. So yeah, it's not like I'm saying, anarchy, but
anarchy, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing ever gets made. It's how it's meant to be.
Yeah. And what will you be talking about, Daniel?
I will be talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is kind of a hot topic right now, and partially because I think it almost has a lot of implications for sort of what artistic integrity is going to be moving forward. But I guess if we're going to talk about in positions that we're defending, I'm going to defend the position that it doesn't actually mean as much as I think everybody wants it to mean, which is a little unfortunate. But there's also just a fascinating story that goes into basically just the creation of this film. So yeah, I'll be delving into that a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited about that because I know literally nothing about that story. So it's going to be kind of a reaction for me. But yeah, so I'll start. And I think I want to start on like a very zoomed out perspective, maybe even starting with like what I think about art, because this is kind of core to me. So call this a presupposition, if you will. I would be happy to talk about like, the philosophy of art and maybe some other stream. But really, I think art is a fundamental thing. And when I say art, I mean a vehicle for beauty. So like a vehicle for beauty to me is fundamental to a society. Well, not even just a society, even to the single units of society, which are people. We truly seek to find beauty in our lives. And I think we really underestimate how much that affects our even like the most mundane behaviors. Like, for example, you pick the color of your mop, some of you, based off of the color of the room that it will be in. Now, Daniel's looking for matching things or what
Look
color
for any color at all.
Yeah, exactly. But it really just like really does, beauty permeates the way that we behave in general. I think underestimate how much that is the case. And I think the biggest examples happens when humans are in duress, when they're the least free, is often when you'll see art come out despite the problems that might have for, everyday people, not even artists. So you'll have people singing in jail cells. I promise you, that will happen. If you jail people and say, all you've got is your cell and your mind, people will start singing and people will start creating harmonies and people will find some sort of beauty. They'll start chalking the walls and they'll do it at even if there is the prospect of being punished for it. You can think of slaves in the field singing hymns and things like that. It's that fundamental to our nature, I think. And so as such, I think we need to look at art as something that we don't need to argue for its value in society or that it needs to exist, because I think it always will and always has to exist. I think the problem is when you try to crush it, But yeah, so that's my perspective on art, like on a very large scale overview. Now, how this relates is, I think, I'm not going to blanket people. I don't like blanketing people's positions. And with this kind of stuff, there are a lot of nuanced different positions. So I'm just going to talk about what I think is the general culture, especially in art communities, towards the free market or versions of free market capitalism. And obviously people have different critiques and people have different remedies and people have different positions. And I'm not going to be able to argue from all those places. I'm just going to talk against what I think is a wrong-headed way about thinking about how art interfaces with free markets. So coming from the presupposition that art is necessary, we all look for it. We look for beauty and we pay for it. And it's kind of baffling to me that at the height of people consuming art is when we kind of see this surge of people being unsatisfied with how the market, I should say, is dealing with art. If you ask people, how do you spend your free time? Most people's free time is spent consuming art. People watch things on streams. People scroll through their Instagram looking at pretty pictures. People do all of that kind of stuff. That's different from saying that it's the best art or that people are consuming the most healthy art. That's a completely different thing, because obviously I don't think the most popular things are necessarily the best arts, but that's a completely different conversation. That has to do with what I think is something that you can't force in people. You can't force people to appreciate, art. You can't just say, you terrible person, you love Marvel movies, you've got to, watch this great Malick film and you must immediately, bow down to it and recognize its inherent, superiority to a Marvel film. Now,
Irving, how dare you smile when the Avengers came out of those portals? That is just, can't believe you. Shame, truly.
Yeah, and that's not to say I don't think we can have good back and forth conversations about what's worthwhile to consume. That's definitely not the case. But we do spend a lot of time consuming art, and probably the most ever. And the average person in, at least, actually, I was going to say at least in the United States, but in the entire world, is consuming art at like much higher frequencies than they were in the past, So that's the bed of what I'm going to say is art is necessary. Art is happening more than usual. And we should be at least cautious about saying things are going to the dumpster. Because that's not obvious to me at all. I actually have a very hopeful view about the future of art. And again, that doesn't mean that all art is worth consuming, or you can't argue about the merits of certain art, et cetera, et cetera. That's a completely different topic to me. So I think a lot of this comes from a place of a lot of artists who are scrapping it out, or know that their future is going to be scrapping it out. meaning they're going to be they think they're going to be eating ramen in their room, sort of working, 100-hour weeks, et cetera, et cetera. And there are definitely a lot of people who are doing that. So that is happening. But I think a lot of this sentiment comes from the idea that art is inherently has value, and we need to sort of move away from a system that doesn't inherently give artists what they're worth. I think that's kind of where some of this anxiety comes from. What are your thoughts, Daniel? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of uncertainty there, and a level of like, you're making a product, you're putting a lot of effort into a product, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to turn around into a success financially, critically. I think film and television media is a very, it's a very uncertain type of art form. Like, I mean, I guess we say about all art forms, they're all uncertain, but I can definitely see where anxiety from that might lead to a sort of a feeling of like, why isn't this doing better? Or like, why isn't what I put work into successful?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the trap that a lot of people fall into. I think sort of where we're getting to here, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting to. Is like, I think a lot of people some people will actually make genuinely really good, art that is moving, et cetera, that maybe, the problem is eyeballs, or the problem is, getting eyeballs on their work. The problem is maybe they're a screenwriter, and they can't get the money to fund what they know is like, the next whatever, And I think that's a lot of where the anxiety comes from. And so you'll see things, at least, in this Rona world, I've been spending a lot of time on like online, boards, and like monitoring what people are thinking and expressing, and the anxieties, especially on Reddit, which is an interesting culture.
I was going to say our favorite focus group of the average person, Reddit.
No, yeah, I know it's not. But like, just putting my ear to the ground, I think that a lot of people, they find it troubling that there is no, support, like with getting a manufacturing job, or like getting a desk job or whatever. There's kind of like a set path to get there, or like a somewhat more like definable path to get there, whether it's getting a license, then doing your job, or if it's like getting the right experience, then doing your job. Film and generally the arts are not really like that. So there's a lot of anxiety with like, what do I do with what I want to do? And I think there are different ways to approach this. Now, I think some people, like me, feel like the only way they'll be happy is if they're creating, and I completely sympathize with that, because at my previous job, I worked as a defense contractor, and the company was great. The job was paid really well. The company was great. Like the standard of living it provided me was, in terms of like flexibility going into work, like, having flex hours, and like kind of creating it was what I think a lot of people identify as the goal, but I just could not possibly be happy. It was like pulling teeth. It was like so against my nature, it was like literally putting, a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. And I was just like, you know what? I'd rather go through the anxiety of being my own boss to make that work, which is a whole other topic. But so I totally understand when people say, I need to do this. And to which I say, good, this is a great time to be an artist. But I think that's I think the problem is that a lot of people don't know what tools are there for them. They don't have they don't know where to start, they don't know where to start. And they see people, like, for example, here's one thing that gave a lot of people anxiety. If you're an artist and you're self-employed, you did not get as much help from the government during coronavirus. I basically got zero help because I don't get unemployment, right? Because I didn't get fired from a job. I am my own boss. But was I financially impacted? Well, yeah, I had a few projects that were canceled, but I didn't really get anything, because we're kind of in this space where people don't think about it as a job. They think about it as like you're just doing whatever, kind of silly guy kind of thing. So it's complicated, and I get where people's anxieties come from. And then I think there's this general I think there are other types of people who view capitalism as necessarily crushing their hopes to getting anything done. And I think I would attribute that a lot to the gatekeeping, that is very, or actually I should say was a lot more prominent, especially in the media space. There are a lot of walls to look at if you're looking at the gates of Hollywood, right? You can't even see over it. It's hard to see what's inside to know how to help yourself. And all of that, I think, can be summed up by saying, I think if we all understood our own power as artists in the products that we offer, and we are also good artists, which is always going to be the caveat, right? Like it's one thing to complain when you're the next, David Fincher or whatever. It's another thing to complain when you're not making good stuff. So those are completely different things. But if you're honestly working and you think that you can get there and, everyone's telling you your stuff is good, you just can't break through. I think you have to think about especially this modern economy in a completely different lens. And I'm just going to tell you this right now. No one owes you anything. And that's hard to hear, no one owes you anything. But that's not different from the rest of the economy, right? It's not different. It's not different for the arts, there are people who would be happiest being doctors who will never make it into medical school for one reason or another. They'll never do it, right? No one owes them that job either, though. And that's the reality of, the world that we live in, right? So, yeah. And I'll say this too. There are a bunch of people who I think are hobbyists who I think, not hobbyists, I shouldn't put it that way. I think they create art for themselves primarily. And I think they think the art they create for themselves ought to then be viable automatically to the public, which,
Yeah, that's a no.
That's, it might, if you're lucky, but, it's not the best assumption. And I think that's actually the way the world works though, right? If I make if I make an invention that helps me in my own life, like, I don't know, even some mundane thing that helps me mop the house or something like that. I don't know, a weird example. But if I make some device that gives me happiness, that doesn't mean, that's completely outside of the art space. That doesn't mean people are going to buy the thing, right? It's the same thing. So you have to identify what you're trying to do. If you're trying to make yourself happy and that's your only goal, it's going to be like every other type of pursuit in life where that's not necessarily going to pan out financially. And you have to come to terms with that, and I'm sorry if that makes you feel like less special as an artist, but you're not special. You're a person.
And like, to some extent, like I very much understand where that feeling of almost like if you make something for yourself and it not panning out, hurting a little bit more with art, because art is incredibly personal.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we make stuff for ourselves, normally it's, and this almost goes back to what you were first talking about, like about art coming out of a lot of stress, a lot of terrible situations, is like for a lot of people, art turns into a form of self-expression or a way of processing things that they've been through, which I'm not going to say is necessarily the best method of therapy. The best method of therapy is going to therapy. However, art's also very cool, and that just kind of is what happens with a lot of art. So when that isn't seen as valued by people other than you, I can definitely see why that hurts. But also, I mean, that's sort of a dangerous game with art. You can't, I mean, it should be personal, but you can't make it your complete investment into your entire being, or else you're not going to be around long.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Yeah. And like, that doesn't mean that the art that you make, to me, it's like this. Like, I view being an artist as a vocation, right? So like, and when I say that, I mean it like in the sense that I want to make art not just for myself, but it definitely is for myself, right? Like, that's not gone, right? But I also want to make art for other people to experience beauty. And I have a very broad definition of beauty. It's not just, oh, this looks nice, you know, like beauty as a much more abstract concept, you know? And so if I'm viewing it as a vocation, of course, it's going to be like every other vocation out there. You know, it's going to require you to assess the market. Whoa, some New York sounds. But it's going to require you to assess the market. And maybe you have 5 art pieces, and maybe you have 5 screenplays that you have. One of them is like the one you really want to make tomorrow, but you can't make it tomorrow because you don't think it's as viable as the least favorite of your screenplays. That is the nature of reality, you know? But the thing is, you still get to make that screenplay, you know? Like, it's not a hopeless thing. And I think that's what a lot of people, it's a rough reality, but that is the way life is. Life is rough. Life is suffering.
Yeah. You got to work up to that favorite screenplay, because like what David Fincher first did, like Alien 3 or something. I don't know if that was his first, but like that definitely wasn't his passion project. But then he also just made Mank, which to my understanding kind of is a passion project of his. It's like based off a book written by his dad or something. Yeah. And it took a long time to get there, but you know, you kind of have to hit those steps. Granted, for some people, Alien 3 might be the goal. So there's a lot of steps also before there that we have to hit, but like,
right.
You know, to some extent, there's always a level of, you have to ascend a ladder. Yeah, you're never gonna jump to the top, because that'd be crazy.
Yeah, 100%.
That'd be wild.
Yeah, and I think in the current economic, current is not the right word, because we're in a very economic question mark right now. But I should say in this era, you know, in this era of art, especially for video people, you know, whether you're a filmmaker, you like making shows, you like making online content, whatever, this is your era. And I don't say that like without realizing that it's hard, because it's still hard. But like, there are 5, 6, 7, 10 different ways I could help you to get there. I'm not there. I'm not saying I'm there, but I'm saying there are 10 different ways I could tell you how you might be able to get there, you know? And a lot of those ways are a lot less bad than others, depending on your personality. So if you're the kind of person who likes climbing the ladder, that's one way. That's the traditional way. If you're the person who can be entrepreneurial with it, like me, that's another way. I don't spend most of my time thinking about films. I spend most of my time thinking about like other media related stuff, even though I consider myself primarily a filmmaker. But to me, that fits my nature better, trying to get through things that way, create, you know, my own company and do things that way. That fits the way I want to do things better. And I'm happy to take the loss of not making films every day or being on set every day in order to do it my way and forge my own path. By the way, if you ever need advice about how to practically do this, hit me up at arielaproductions at gmail.com. I talk to the most random people all the time, and I'd be happy to help you think about how you might be able to think about your pursuit in the right way. If you truly want to pursue it as a vocation and not just as a, not just creating art, but you want it to be your job, then hit me up. I'll be happy to give you some insight. But I've been rambling on. I think a lot of critiques of capitalism by artists, just bluntly, comes from a very Marxist perspective, and I'm just going to be blunt as well. I am not a fan of generally Marxism.
I don't know what it means, so that helps me out.
Well, so for a very general overview of what Marxism tends to be. So Marxism is a flavor of communism. Communism is like, I'm going to butcher the technical definition. It's when the means of production are controlled by the state and you replace the central currency. That's actually the strict definition, I believe, something like that. So like, it's not just that you replace the means of production with the government. So the government is the central planner. That's one way to think about it. The government plans everything about the economy. That's what communism is. That's what socialism is. That's the technical definition of socialism. And the definition of communism is socialism plus there is no currency, meaning things are so centrally planned that there's no need to exchange money anymore in order for goods to be exchanged. Things get exchanged by the government, right? That would be the ideal economy. Marxism is a particular flavor of that has a bunch of philosophies attached to it that I won't, bore everyone with, but it's the predominant communist philosophy worldwide, and it's definitely the predominant here in the United States as well, in terms of what affects the way that we view the world, in terms of what a lot of people believe, and that has a bit of a flavor. That has a class warfare. That adds like a class warfare component to communism, which doesn't inherently have that. It always has that flavor, but that's not inherent to replacing the means of production with the government. You don't need to have class warfare to have that, kind of. But Marxism involves a particular set of steps and philosophies that people need to adhere to in order to create a Marxist, what I would describe as a utopia. That's kind of Marx was very much so like, if we just do these things, if everyone just believes X, Y, Z, then we'll reach the mountaintop, we'll be in utopia. I am a firm believer that anyone who thinks that they can create a utopia is nuts, and and that human nature doesn't allow us to create utopias. That's not a cynical view of humanity at all. That's not, not to say that humans aren't good. It's just that I don't think we can ever get to a place where we will all be happy and in some sort of constantly satisfied state or something like that.
Honestly, this sounds kind of boring, but
yeah, right. Yeah. So addressing that angle of things, usually there's a critique that is class-based on capitalism and art. So there's this idea, if you think about Renaissance times, that the only people who were commissioning and buying art were really rich people. Now, one thing I got to say is we ain't in the Renaissance anymore. That's the first thing I have to say to that. We've democratized art a lot more than in the Renaissance era. And that has to do a lot with the rising of, not rising, because it didn't exist anymore. The middle class didn't exist in the Renaissance, era. There was no, the average guy was poor. That's a completely different scenario than now, where in the United States, I should say, the average guy is not poor, so we can buy art now. I can, people back then random person couldn't buy art, but I can buy a movie. I can buy I can buy a painting that's actually, an excellent painting. And it might cost me money, yeah, and I'm not going to be able to buy the Mona Lisa, right? But we're talking about the availability of art, right? I think a lot of the critique is that rich people hoard art. That's the old Marxist, because Marxism precedes our current state of democratized art. So, a lot of that was drawing upon the Renaissance sort of era and people hoarding art, and it just stayed in their estate and only their rich friends could see it and whatever. But we're not there anymore. I can see a lot of art and have my pick and choosing of it in today's understanding. And I can
see the Mona Lisa on here if I wanted to.
Right. Exactly.
It's not the actual art, but I can see a representation of it to some extent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so that's to say that I think the angle tends to devolve into we've got to replace the capitalist system with a system that's more centralized in the way that it deals with art. There's I think there's there's a partialism towards places like NPR that does a film festival and funds filmmakers, or museums giving out funds to artists, and things like Studio North, which benefited me quite a bit. I think a lot of people say the solution is to expand those things like crazy, so that these centralized institutions can go ahead and hand out, essentially grants to people, so that the people who ought to be recognized get recognized. There's a big problem with that. I think that is not obvious or I don't know, I think should be obvious to a lot of people.
Yeah, there's I can, I'm pretty much learning about this topic as you're saying it, but I can already think of a number of problems that I've seen arise in just the work that we've done, where that system could be very fallible.
Yeah. And there are many ways that there are problems with it. And I think a lot of people, they want to see billion-dollar budgets for the arts, in, federal spending, and no, this is the quickest way you get to the death of art, in my opinion. And this is not just my opinion, but this is the history of it. The moment your source of income becomes not the free market is the moment where you are you're not controlled by the market anymore, but you're controlled by a few people in a room, right? This is completely different now. You can't just put out any art piece you want, right? You have to pander not to the market or what people need as because like I said, this is my axiom. Art is necessary. This is not something people will ever avoid. People love art. So the free market, people are buying art because they love it, because they need beauty in their lives. When you get a government-controlled, arts program, you're getting government art. That is what you're getting, right? Because the only people who will get grants are people who, are approved. Now you could say, well, we could have real artists running the programs. Yeah. Who are the real artists and who gets to decide what is real art and what things are good and bad is kind of how you get, propaganda, that is the close, because, well, who hires that person? Well, it's a politician. And do you trust politicians? No, you don't trust politicians. At least I think most people would say so. At least I would not trust politicians to be hiring the art director of the United States to be issuing grants out to people.
No.
Because, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what were you saying?
I think the number one issue that I see with a grant-based system is pretty much exactly what you're saying there, was the question of who determines who gets that grant. Because, we can sort of speak to the grant processes that I've been part of and the festival circuits that I've seen. And as much as you like not to think so, it very much is, do you know these people?
Yeah.
If you know that, and this is just kind of applicable to Hollywood in general, it's about who you know, and it always has been, kind of always will be. Like, if you don't know someone at the film festival, it's going to be significantly harder to get into a film festival than if you don't know someone there. As opposed to if you do know someone there, it's about to get a whole lot easier.
Yeah,
and, you know, I guess we're talking in a relative small scale here, but I'd be wary of how you could implement a system that's objective about ensuring that there's not a bias towards who gets or receives money or recognition through forms like that.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. And that's historically, if you go to the Soviet Union, which I know some people would be mad to use an example, but it is honestly one of the biggest examples of what happens when art becomes centrally planned, right? All art was made in the image of the Soviet Union, essentially, you know? And obviously, if we did that in the United States, it would look a little different, but you're like, it would devolve necessarily because of human behavior to something like that, right? How many regimes is not the right word, how many administrations or congresses will you go through until the thing becomes essentially, you know, because these people are replaceable, they're beholden to the political process, and politicians control everything. How many iterations of that art administration will you get until you just get straight propaganda as the only thing that comes out of that benefits whatever politician hired the art director? You know, it won't take long, is my opinion, because I don't trust politicians. So, yeah, but the government already does this, and it does it to a level that doesn't bother me because it's so minuscule. You know, it's you know, you have a few $1,000 here, a few $1,000 there. That doesn't bother me. It's just that a lot of people come up with a solution that there needs to be some sort of like artist's wage or like some sort of like art specific solution that like, and I'm just like, no, you will not be able to say whatever you want eventually. And that's what will almost certainly happen. And I view museums and things like that are partly publicly funded or like, you know, have a donor base instead of are economically driven. I view them as funeral parlors, straight up. That is where art goes to die. And the reason I say that is simply because if the only chance that you have is to please a donor, that your art is good, or to please the government, that your art needs to be put in the museum, your art form as a whole is probably dead, right? You have no means of reviving it anymore because your pulse is now, you know, metered by whether a donor is going to give you that money or not. You're trying to satisfy the donor. You're not trying to satisfy people as a whole. The whole apparatus starts to crumble, right? Like the whole. This is what happened to orchestras. If Ben was here, he could definitely talk about it a little bit better. But like, orchestras became donor-based when they stopped being economically viable. When are orchestras going to come back to the general public's thinking? Not anytime soon while they are donor-based. And the reason why is because their interests are not the same as the public's, right? You're not trying to speak to the public's needs and the public's soul, if you will, right? You're trying to speak to the donor, which is a completely different thing, you know? And what you get is a lack of innovation in the orchestral space because I'm telling you, you don't have to change your art form to make it relevant and cool. You know, you can do a lot of really cool things and you can talk to me about it if you want ideas, but there's a lot of room for innovation in even old art forms like orchestral performances. It's just that people aren't changing the way they do orchestral performances because there's no economic driver to orchestral performances anymore. And thus the art form is essentially in a catatonic state because it won't adjust to what the market responds to anymore, if that makes sense.
I think the last time I went to an orchestra was when they put it to a movie. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and the thing is, there are a lot of performers who would love to do that, and they would be happy instrumentalists if they were in the pit of a movie theater, which I think is a fantastic idea. But who is doing that? Because no one's entrepreneurial in that space anymore. They're run by people who satisfy suits, which is kind of honestly the opposite of what we were trying to achieve in the first place, which is kind of funny to me, Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the moment that we say, oh, cinema needs to be propped up by the government, or here's a good example, AMC. I will not use an expletive. Tract. AMC whined and moaned about the theaters being shut down, which it was terrible, unforeseen problems, etc., etc. But they went to Universal and they said, oh my gosh, if you don't show your movies beforehand, then and Universal was like, whatever, man. And then AMC was like, oh no, Universal is evil, and I'm like, AMC, shut up and innovate, because you are literally just you are trying to ask for special treatment. Even if you got special treatment from the government, that will just stagnate the changes that you need to make your business actually good, because your business sucks. That is the not just from a user experience perspective, but on a purely business level, AMC is a sucky business. They're a popcorn company. They're not a film company. They're a popcorn company. How are you going to peddle films well when you're a popcorn company? You're not. And so if it weren't for the potential ramifications of cinema culture in general that I don't have enough control over now, or I don't have control over at all now, I would be like, all right, see ya, AMC, because someone's got to do the theater business better, and they'll take your place, But in the current way things stood, there would be no one to take its place, because all theater companies are popcorn companies in the current.
I was going to say, I don't know if I think that just means the end of theaters and as a general concept, which is also, kind of fair based on how the average person wants to consume movies nowadays.
But the thing is, I think things like theaters have unique value. I love theaters.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think they have things to offer. They just never communicated. When was the last time you saw a theater advertise for why you should see a specific movie at that theater? Never. They don't communicate it. They don't communicate why they don't engage with the culture. This is exactly why I think mixed media is cool and important. It's where this is how culture happens. We talk about things, we put them out there, we have public conversations. These theaters were just boardroom people who just want to sell popcorn. It's okay, well, of course you're going to be distant from the product you're selling if the product you're selling is not movies. You don't understand how to sell movies in the modern era, and so you deserve to die. And I promise you, if AMC gave me their assets, I could probably turn it into something. And this is not just me being arrogant. I just think it's that obvious. There are ways to promote yourself that are modern, actually, speaking to youth. While they're young too, not even our people our age. I mean, when are you? How are theaters aspiring 12-year-olds? They're not. They're terrible. That's a whole side note. But yeah, so that's one aspect I think is wrong-minded. Is saying we need to centrally plan this thing. And then I'm just okay, you think art can be counterculture when the government controls art? Yeah, no, that's not happening. You think art can be counterculture, and you think art can speak to people's needs and inherent desire for beauty when it's being controlled by a few suits? Good luck with that. It's not going to work. So what other alternative you have is to work with what you got. And what you got is a system where you can show your thing to the people who will appreciate it. If you're satisfied with that being a few thousand people, then you're satisfied. If you're satisfied with that being 100,000 people, you're satisfied. If you want to make blockbusters, that's a whole different thing. But you got to I don't think that another axiom of mine is that the more transcendent the art, and I get that that's the whole bunny trail to go down, and I'm not going to go down it. But the more transcendent and the more you speak to human nature in your art, and you speak to the human needs, and those needs change over time, people, as culture changes, those needs change. As you speak to people's hearts, you will get business. And this is a principle I call the new economy. It's like the idea that fakeness doesn't sell anymore. And this is demonstrably true. Like you just have to look around. The most transparent people are the ones who are making the most money. The people who who show you their business and how much money they're making are making the most money. The people who don't keep trade secrets anymore are making the most money. How is that? People like genuineness. Shocker. People enjoy consuming from people who may even make lesser products sometimes, but they think the person is a genuine person, and they like that they made that product in an honest fashion. And as an investor in Etsy, so I track these things for my own financial purposes. So I'm in tune with how people consume, and it's changed. It's been changing since the 90s, but it's morphing now more than ever towards sort of this new economy mindset where don't sell popcorn at $20. No one likes that. And they're not fooled, they're not thinking, oh yeah, this popcorn is some premium. No one's fooled.
Good popcorn.
No one believes that, So sell the movie, because that's what people will appreciate, sell the experience of being in the theater. That's different, and be honest about it. And don't try to pinch pennies with people anymore. That's going to lose you sales more than the pennies that you're pinching. But these companies are run by people who have an outdated understanding of how the market is moving, Anyway, so what I'm saying is we can get there in the current state of things, and it's the best time it's ever been. The biggest critique I have over everything is that we've allowed monopolies to kill the free market. And I say it's killing it now. It's not it's not something that in 10 years the market will no longer be free. The market's already not as free as it should be. And it's actually pretty crazy how much we can make in this current condition of having essentially overbearing, gigantic corporations, looking to screw us on every corner, right? It's actually pretty remarkable that we can have the amount of openness and democratization that we've been seeing in art, given the Disneys of the world gobbling up Fox and the AT&Ts of the world. It's crazy. It's nuts. And I'll tell you why monopolies, as a capitalist, I'll tell you why monopolies aren't capitalists. Monopolies kill the central tenet of capitalism, which is supply and demand. When you control, and people think that supply and demand is like cornering the market or controlling supply has to be an all or nothing kind of thing. Either you own everything and then you're monopoly. No, that's never been the idea of being a monopoly. When the Sherman, I always mess this up, Sherman Antitrust Act or whatever. When that was passed, the law does not say when you corner the market you get smashed. The law says when you become too powerful, which it actually says something as vague as that, unfortunately. But
we love old legislation.
Yeah, exactly. When you become too powerful, you are considered a trust, a monopoly, essentially. And you'll have this current era where the law has become so divorced from the initial intentions of preserving capitalism through antitrust laws that we have a situation where Facebook, that's the actually most blatant example. Not Facebook, Amazon is the most blatant example. Amazon will keep a few competitors. They could destroy them tomorrow if they wanted to, but they'll keep them along to say, look, we don't have 100% of the market. We have 95% of the market. Look at this 5%.
eBay still exists. We're not everything.
Yeah, exactly. And what this does is it becomes anti-competitive, and competition is what gives us the freedom to begin with. When you don't have competition anymore, when you don't have people picking what they want to watch anymore, everything comes from one source. You no longer have the freedom of creating things that people need. You get what people think you need, or at worst, you essentially get propaganda just from a different source. You get it from something that's essentially as powerful as the government would be if it were spending billions of dollars on art. It's the same problem where the gates are being locked by things that are not beholden to what the market actually needs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's where we've been for a while now. It's just getting worse. So, and they can bleed too. That's the crazy part. Like Disney has lost I should say it this way. They have not made as much money as they should have on many things.
Disney has taken a couple pretty big L's this past year. I mean, granted it's coronavirus, but they made a couple bets that I don't think have paid off particularly well. One big one, I don't know, do you mind if I go into an example real quick?
Yeah, do that.
One big one I think has been Mulan, the 2020 remake, which theoretically should have been quite the economic success, but they released it on Disney Plus as a premium access film. I don't know anybody who actually bought it, and if I remember correctly, it actually really underperformed for what they were expecting. And there's just a number of things that went into that. There was the fact that it was $30 on top of your subscription to Disney Plus. And there was also a lot of controversy with that film and with its connections to China. Mm-hmm. And I can only really speak to this perspective of the Asian American community that I interact with, but a lot of Asian Americans chose not to watch it because we didn't like how the film. Well, first, on the one hand, it's behind the scenes. It was still primarily created by white filmmakers. Mm-hmm. So why is it being marketed as this triumph for Asian American film? Mm-hmm. But two, there's also a lot of connections to things we don't agree with about the way China kind of runs things, particularly with the Uyghurs, which is a whole topic that I will not lie and say I'm the most informed about. But
it's bad.
There's that way. It's bad. Yeah. And there are a number of, there was just a lot of things where it seemed like Disney was trying to push the film in one way, but, people responded. People said, we don't really like what this is. We don't really like what it's doing. Also, we have a lot of live action Mulan movies from China that are good. We don't need this live action white version of it. And so we're not going to support this. And from everything I've heard, it didn't actually do very well as they expected. So there is still a level of control that people have over what even the big mouse wants to produce, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and here's the thing though. The thing is, if I made a bet that failed that badly, it didn't. They made their money back, so it's not like they lost money, but they didn't make as much money as was worth the effort that they put into it. You know what I mean? They expected to get a lot more returns, and that's always bad. It's bad to your investors. It's bad to everyone involved, right? And the thing is, they can afford to take that kind of hit and live to see another 3 decades. They have enough market control, influence, and the platforms as well that they own. They own basically TV. They own so much of the way we consume things that they'll be here tomorrow, and they'll even try. The crazy thing I see too, they'll even try to shove down movies down your throat that didn't do well initially, and they'll still keep trying to beat it down your throat and say this is good, guys. Like, watch, please.
But do you want to watch Mulan? It's free now. No, I still don't want to watch Mulan, Disney. I still don't like what you did there.
Right. And they're a soulless company. Like, they're a company that's, and I don't say that, like, as, like, a typical, I'm not trying to be, like, like, whiny about, like, that's not, if they were a soulless company and I could compete against them, I'd be like, whatever, man. Like, be a soulless company, I'll crush you, But, like, if they're going to be this devoid of, like, true, they don't want to speak to the, like what people need, because they don't know what they need, because they're not people. Like, it's like this mega corporation that just runs an algorithm. I'm not kidding about that too. Like, that's actually how Netflix has gone. That's kind of why Netflix went the way it did, is because they went from just doing it the traditional way where people pitch to them and they blah, 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 to seeking people out based off of algorithmic, consumption, like based off of what people consume. That is not the way you make art people need. That's the way you feed people just enough to stay on your platform for another month.
Yeah.
That's how
what they wanted in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And and that would be fine. I wouldn't care if they were making that business decision, because they would get punished by the market. And once they get punished by the market, other people would compete with them. But though they're so monstrously large that they get punished, but they don't really get punished. Like they.
Oh. You know who got punished?
Who?
Quibi got punished.
Yeah. Actually, should have been too, because it was a trash idea.
Absolutely should. It was the worst, and like there's so many problems with the idea of Quibi, and it's so clearly like some old Hollywood exec whose name is Jeffrey Katzenberg coming up with an idea that he was like, this is what the kids want. And short form content, because we're all on our phones now, and we'll get big names who can make short form content for us, not realizing that the majority of the people who watch short form content aren't watching big names. They're watching very small people who, this is also going back to your point about authenticity, who they feel are authentic. Mm-hmm. They're watching YouTubers, they're watching streamers in all this short form content. They're not. I mean, I guess technically some people are watching Will Smith. I don't understand what's happening there. But like for the most part, it's they're watching people who they feel like there's a connection to, i.e., not Anna Kendrick in a show about love.
Yeah.
Because she's Anna Kendrick and no one has talked to her in 20 years. So yeah, it was an analysis of the market that just went really, really poorly, and the company ended up going out of business, and it deserved it.
Yeah, it did. And the thing is, like, if Disney did the same thing, it would be like a little flick, and they would have been like, oh, we'll just not do that anymore, and we'll just be here tomorrow serving you the same bull crap that we've been serving. It's like, and that to me is not a free market. That is a market with a gigantic gate. That at least with old Hollywood, the gate was still subject to the market somewhat. Like when I say old Hollywood, I mean you have to go back a good bit. But yeah. But like there were still gates, and you still needed a large amount of cash to make a movie, and you still had to go through certain channels. But at least the company was still beholden to what the market actually thinks about what you make. Disney is not beholden to that. And I think there are a lot of artists who have anxiety about, like, oh man, like Marvel movies have taken over everything. And like, I agree with you. I actually don't think this would last this long if Disney didn't take up space, because that's what they do with their massive, because you can there's a lot of space, which is why we've seen, a lot of democratization. So that's good. But like, it's not as great as it could be, just because how many slots are taken up by Disney movies, in the theater, per month, like any Disney affiliated work, you know what I mean?
And yeah, that was a controversy with The Last Jedi, I think. It pushed out other movies from IMAX, and they said they wouldn't. I don't know if it's Last Jedi. If someone's fact-checking this entire podcast, I'm sure I said 5 incredibly wrong things so far, so just put this down too. Yeah. But I know that Disney's had history of threatening certain theaters if they weren't going to switch, or if they weren't going to put their film into like IMAX screens, or put enough put enough screenings of their film, which is dangerous and a little terrifying.
Yeah. I think all of that is terrible. So what can we do about it? We can say, look, we don't want to live. If you want to ask me what my economic philosophy is, I'm sure I'll talk about it at some point. I used to be a lot more guarded with my opinions about things, and I've stopped caring as of late. So if you want to know my economic philosophy, I believe in something called distributism. You can look that up. And the idea is essentially that you want to supercharge capitalism, right? You don't want this kind of you're not a laissez-faire capitalist at all, actually. You're pretty, it's like a souped up antitrust sort of perspective that the most controlling entities in the market should be the ones that deserve it because they've proven so through their actual honest efforts. And if you do have, any sort of large companies that they're beholden to, the people who both work in them and who live around them, but people can look that up. But what we can do about it is we can say, we can do two things. We can advocate for what would have been in the antitrust era of this country, the destruction of these companies. They would not have survived. And two, we can stop accepting bullshit too, because we can sorry, man, I cussed.
I didn't do it. I thought it was going to be me. I didn't do it.
But we could stop accepting BS and it sucks that they can hold out for so long and withstand so much, but take your dollars and move them to the place that is the most fulfilling. And I promise you that and I know that the most fulfilling place for your dollars are not whatever subscription, from some big, thing that you have right now. It's okay if you want to, if your idea is like, well, I get some things, there's some cool things on there. Okay, fine. But at least think about the way you consume art a little bit differently and say, what is worth having a 10 times better experience of this 2 hours that I'm about to spend consuming art? And am I willing to pay for that? Because I think we have a cultural problem with arts as a whole, with both artists and with consumption of art. We have a very consumerist kind of attitude towards consumption in general, and art is no different. But that's not, to me, a problem of the system. That's the problem with culture, and you don't change those things by force. You can't, right? You can change the things by talking like we're talking now. So, yeah, anyway, that is my segment.
All right, so that being said, let's talk about how a streaming service kind of cynically made a 4-hour-long movie that I absolutely watched.
Oh, man.
I'm part of the problem. But, yeah, you think it's about, we're going to transition over?
Wait, what?
You think it's about time to transition over to Zack Snyder?
You want one of your pictures up?
Not really. Yeah, sure, why not? All right. Cool. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that this is going to tie into the earlier conversation a little bit more than it might seem at first. So, Justice League has been a nightmare to anybody who's familiar with the saga. Irving, I know that you're not particularly familiar, so I just kind of want to run through it and at the end sort of talk about what are the implications of it and how does it relate to what we've been talking about, because like I said, I think it actually pretty strongly does. So first let's talk about Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder is a interesting man. He is a director, writer, producer, and he's very, very famous for what I'd call very stylized filmmaking techniques, very stylized, and what we'll call big ideas.
Sucker Punch is a very average-looking movie with average ideas.
Oh, I can make that on my iPhone. But yeah, big ideas. So yeah, our example is, there's like 300, Sucker Punch, Watchmen. He did some older stuff, but he really started developing a style around, I think, the time he made 300. And then, so after the Christopher Nolan trilogy of Batman movies, which everybody loved, and everybody was like, wow, that's so good. What about the other superheroes? There was actually plans for a Justice League film back then from the director of Mad Max, the Mad Max series.
Interesting.
But that completely fell apart. And then it was Christopher Nolan was still supposed to be executive producing on this new DC direction, right? So David S. Goyer, who co-wrote the Dark Knight trilogy and as well as the Blade trilogy from like the early 2000s, pitched to Nolan an idea for a new Superman movie. And Christopher Nolan was like, oh, I like that. That's good. Yeah. Let's go talk to some people. So they headed over to DC and they got it approved. So it was a script written by David S. Goyer with a story by Goyer and Christopher Nolan. And Christopher Nolan was also a producer on this film, not an executive producer, I believe, like an actual, feet on the ground producer.
Yeah, it was actually helping.
Yeah, and they brought in Zack Snyder to direct because, he did Watchmen for DC previously. I think that was sort of a different era of DC, but, very stylized. They were like, that's the feel we want. And so they made Man of Steel, which clocks in at 2 hours and 23 minutes. I'm not mentioning that for no reason. That's important. And it was a very dark movie. I'm like, Irving, you saw it, right?
Yeah, I did see it, yeah.
Yeah, it's dark. There's a lot of, like, really heavy religious imagery.
Yeah.
Superman's compared to Jesus more than a few times.
Yeah.
And, especially when we were coming off of, this is 2013. We just came from Marvel's Avengers in 2012, which is, upbeat, Joss Whedon-isms. We'll get back to Joss Whedon, too. But Joss Whedon-isms, it was very fun and upbeat. So when people saw this take on Superman, they were kind of confused, I'd say. And I think that confusion is why the Man of Steel, it wasn't, like, well-received. People didn't love it. But they also didn't hate it. Like, it wasn't not well received. It was just fine. So I'm going to break down some numbers. I'm going to do this for each of the important films here. The film was made on a budget of $225 million. So if we're doing the math at home, in theory, we'd want to make at least $675 million to be profitable. We usually use a metric of 3 times the budget. That's probably going to be covering your initial budget, your advertising costs, and profit. So it grossed $291 million domestically, $377 internationally, for a worldwide of $668 million. Now, I know I just said 675, but it turns out that the film actually did profit around $42.7 million, which doesn't sound like a lot when I just said the budget was $225 million.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's still $47 million. That's more than I'm ever going to see in my entire life. So,
Right.
It made a fair amount. Rotten Tomatoes, we could go on a whole thing about how Rotten Tomatoes is not really a good metric for reviewing a film. But I'm going to use it. It's the easiest one that everybody knows. 56%, very middling reviews. Most of the critique was centered around how the film, for one, was dark. 2, it was long. 3, it had a lot of what people call mindless action and mindless violence, where things were just getting destroyed, cities just left and right, and like there was almost like not a lot of heart to it. People felt, which is all fair. Having seen the film, yeah, that's pretty accurate. So, the movie did well enough to get a sequel and to start a universe called the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, which Zack Snyder actually pitched as a 5-film arc, going from Man of Steel to the sequel, Batman vs. Superman, to then Justice League, and then 2 more Justice League movies.
Interesting.
Which is very, very different from Marvel. Because Marvel, as we all know, made a bunch of individual solo movies to introduce us to characters, give them their own like setup, and then bring them all together for these little super films, right?
Yeah.
There was Avengers, Captain America Civil War, then Endgame or Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
And that worked out really well for them. Maybe too well. Well, we can get back to that when we talk about how this is all sort of connecting. But DC said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make a 5-film arc. And each film basically introduces a new character or two. Okay. Weird, but okay. So then in 2016, 3 years later, we get Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Dun, dun, dun. Wow, people hated this movie. We're back with being directed by Zack Snyder. It was written, and the script was originally written by David S. Goyer, with a story by Goyer and Snyder. But then was actually rewritten at some point by Chris Terrio, who won the Oscar for adapting the Argo screenplay way back in 2012. And he kind of starts to become a more central figure to the creation of DCEU as well at this point. And conversely, this is kind of when Nolan started moving away a little bit. He moved to executive producer, which, if you don't know, executive producers don't really do that much.
Their name.
Yeah, the kind of name. Because, DC, they made the Dark Knight trilogy and everyone loved it. So they're like, we want that name still. So yeah, that's kind of who's behind it. I'm also going to mention the music behind it, because I was thinking Ben was going to be here, but he's not here, but that's okay. But I think it's still kind of interesting. So the majority of the music was done by Hans Zimmer, classic. We all know Hans Zimmer. I don't know Ben's opinion on Hans Zimmer, but I think he does some good stuff. As well as Junkie XL, who did the score for Mad Max, actually. Fury Road.
Ben does not like Hans Zimmer, by the way.
Oh, that's a shame. Come on, Ben. We got the Bois. We like the Bois. I fully understand why you might hate him. Anyway, so Batman vs. Superman. It continued to be a really, really dark take on the DC universe. And so much, I actually didn't know this until I was doing research for this. And then when I read it, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I kind of hate it. A lot of people saw this movie as an allegory about America's response to 9/11.
Oh, interesting.
Because a lot of what the film does is kind of addressing the critique of Man of Steel, which is mindless violence, cities being destroyed for no reason. And they actually then use that as a jumping off point for Bruce Wayne's character. Yeah. Which I know is controversial, but I actually like that choice a lot. I thought that was really interesting. And there's actually a series of really interesting choices here. We have an older Batman with Ben Affleck, Batfleck, as we affectionately call him, a very young Lex Luthor. And this was also the movie where they introduced Wonder Woman before she got her own movie in 2017. Right. But yeah, because of all that mindless violence, people kind of saw, oh, it's Ben, look at that.
Oh. Here, you keep talking. I'm going to drag Ben into the stream.
All right, I'm going to keep talking. So, a lot of people saw Batman's character in Batman v Superman as sort of the right-wing response to 9/11, where it's like, oh, we have to kill everything, as opposed to, honestly, I didn't look too deeply into this because I didn't have time, but I was like, this is a wild look at this movie. And actually, being familiar with Zack Snyder, I'm kind of not surprised because, like we said, he likes the big ideas that don't necessarily pay off or come together. I'm being mean to Zack Snyder. Everything I've heard about him is that he's very nice. He's a very cool guy. I'd love to meet him someday, but yeah, big ideas. Right. So the film was poorly received. It was 2.5 hours again, which people thought was too long. Thought it was too dark, too pretentious, and too long. So, and also people had an issue with the ending twist. I'm not gonna spoil it unless you haven't seen it, but I can confirm it's really dumb. It's not good. It's bad. So now, quick box office. So the movie was very expensive to make. It was $250 million. Wow. And worldwide, it brought in $873 million.
Yeah.
Which is really good and led to a net profit of $105 million, which actually wasn't as good as they were hoping for, but I think that's pretty good. But what happened here that was a problem was that the film had a really massive opening, $422.5 million internationally in its first weekend, and that's the fifth biggest of all time as of that release. But within the second weekend, it dropped 68.4%, which is a lot.
That's huge, yeah.
Like, you want to look at like a 30% is probably ideal, right? It was the second biggest drop for a superhero film since the 2003 Hulk, which is, if anyone's seen that movie, not a good sign. Yeah. So between critics, between audiences, between the box office, people hated this movie, got terrible feedback, and that really, really scared Warner Brothers.
Right.
Which was a problem because Justice League was about to start production. Batman v Superman came out in March 2016. I think they started filming April 2016. Also, is anyone else hearing that echo? Sorry, just real quick.
Here, actually, let's just bring in Ben right now. So Ben is here to join us, and I'm going to do a fancy transition to another layout. Look what I learned. How's it going, Ben?
All right. Can you hear that? Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about showing up. It's much later than I was supposed to, but...
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Come on, man. I've been mentioning composers just for you. Although we actually get into the most interesting composers now.
Oh.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, sir.
You can go ahead, Ben. Or not Ben, Daniel.
Oh, we continue? Okay.
Yeah, you can continue.
All right, so Justice League. The film was ready to go into production a month after the release of Batman vs. Superman. And Warner Brothers got real scared. They brought in Jeff Johns and John Berg, Jeff Johns was a higher up at DC originally. They brought them in to do a real quick rewrite of the film and try to create a lighter tone, and they described it as a more hopeful and optimistic DC extended universe. Mm-hmm. So within that month, they were doing rewrites, and they actually continued doing rewrites into shooting, as I could tell. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it seems like filming happened. It went well enough. You know, we have a script here primarily by Chris Terrio, based on a script by David S. Goyer that was rewritten by Terrio because David S. Goyer was doing all of his work quite early on. Although our official credits are going to show a very different story than what I just told. And the music was going to be by Junkie XL after Hans Zimmerman decided that he didn't want to do superheroes ever again, which was a lie because he then came back and did other superhero movies. He just didn't want to do this one. Yeah.
Zimmerman can get away with whatever he wants to.
Exactly. He's the one who will come in and come out. But after filming, Snyder assembled a 5-hour cut of the film. Like 5 whole hours.
That's gigantic, yeah.
Which once again scared the DC executives. He was able to cut it down to a 3.5-hour film that was actually pretty much ready to go except for some VFX work. But the Warner Brothers executives watching the movie said, no, we don't want this. This is bad. This is unviewable. This is going to be a worse disaster than Batman vs. Superman. So the CEO of Warner Brothers at that time, Kevin Tsujihara, mandated that the film had to be under 2 hours. So they were trying to go from 3.5 to 2 hours, which, we've all been in the filmmaking process. That's almost half your film. That's basically impossible.
That's no good.
Without some really severe rewrites. And that's where Joss Whedon comes in.
Oh no.
I hope nobody likes Joss Whedon because
I despise Joss Whedon.
Yeah, I'm about to be real mean. So initially, Whedon and Snyder were working together during post-production to make a lighter, leaner version of the film. They were trying to tone lighter, shorter, get condensed. But then tragedy struck. And this is actually very sad. Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide, I think in March of 2017.
Yeah.
So after 2 months, after 2 months of dedicating time and work to the post-production of Justice League, he decided that he had to leave, along with his wife, who was producing the film. What that meant was that Whedon basically took over the production of the film. And with that takeover, a lot of things happened. So Whedon rewrote about 80 pages of script, 80 pages that were going to be filmed, which is basically a new film. He became credited as co-writer along with Terrio, and Snyder was moved only to being director. And Whedon ended up shooting basically 75% of the film, according to Snyder. Only 25% of that film that Snyder wanted ended up in the final release. Whedon also replaced Junkie XL with Danny Elfman for the score, despite the fact that Junkie XL had finished a score for the Snyder cut of the film, like completely done. Just threw it out.
Wait, Joss Whedon made the score?
No, he hired Danny Elfman.
Oh, okay.
He kicked off Junkie XL.
Wait. Pause it real quick.
Yes.
So you're saying the guy went away because his daughter committed suicide, and the studio took this as an opportunity to allow. I assume the studio would have to essentially greenlight Joss Whedon going ham on the thing, and the studio was like, let's use this opportunity to do what we want with this thing.
Yeah, this is our opportunity to fix it. That's a little. We don't like that. Whedon basically got in fights with everybody. Patty Jenkins, the director of Wonder Woman, hugely disliked Whedon's work because Zack Snyder and Patty Jenkins worked together super closely to make sure that the continuity of Wonder Woman worked with Justice League, and that Justice League would work with Wonder Woman 84. She wanted to make sure that there was continuity, a concept. Joss Whedon did whatever he wanted. He basically rewrote the character into something that Patty Jenkins called essentially a different character. And here's where I'd say it kind of gets even worse, is that Ray Fisher, the actor who played Cyborg, the only main black cast of the film, accused Joss Whedon of, quote, gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable behavior during the reshoots. Fisher pointed out that Whedon cut or reduced many of the roles of minority characters within the film. And now that we've seen Snyder's cut, it's actually really kind of jarring. Ray Fisher was almost the main character of Snyder's cut, but in the Joss Whedon cut, he's such a small to the side character. And it's not just him, it's his family, and there's some other characters in there that have such smaller roles that it's kind of like, this is a bad look. Ray Fisher actually ended up accusing John Berg and Jeff Johns, who was brought in to make the universe lighter, of being very complacent, which led to a series of investigations, which led to a conclusion that nobody's exactly sure of. We don't know what really happened, but we do know that after a couple of weeks after that, Joss Whedon left a HBO show he was producing. And HBO is, of course, Warner Media, same group. So it seems like Joss Whedon might be getting kind of kicked out of the HBO Warner Brothers bubble. although it doesn't end there. There's actually more Ray Fisher drama where seems like he's getting kind of written out of the extended universe. He was going to be in the Flash movie. He got kicked from that. The Cyborg movie is almost completely shut down. So, rest in peace to our one black superhero in the DC universe. Also, rest in peace to the black superhero in the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
Literally on that. Despite all this, though, Whedon successfully got the film down to 2 hours, and the film was released in November 2017 to bad reception. All of this for nothing, basically. So Justice League at exactly 2 hours, it underperformed. Its box office, well, the budget, because of all these reshoots, ballooned incredibly. It was a $300 million film. It grossed 229 domestically, and internationally 428, and which for worldwide is 657. When you're hoping for at least 900, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I saw a figure that said the net profit was roughly negative 60 million, which isn't the worst. Could be worse. But once again, when it's
making a Justice League movie,
it's pretty bad when you're making Justice League movie. And, I'm saying it's not bad in the context of $300 million. $60 million is still a wild amount of money. So financially, bomb. 40% Rotten Tomatoes. Everyone criticizing thin plot, not enough character development. Characters are basically being thrown in with no development, which was what we were all concerned about when they decided to do this arc rather than the individual movies for each character. Became true. They did credit it for being an improvement over the last films in terms of fun, but generic villain, underdeveloped new characters, it felt meh at best. So much so that and there was so much change that Christopher Nolan and Deborah Snyder ended up telling Zack not to watch it because they said it would break his heart. And I don't think he's ever actually watched it. Which is, there's a lot of tragedy in that, between the daughter and then your film basically being taken away from you. Hate to see it. And after the release of Justice League, the DCEU kind of fell apart. Snyder was relegated to an executive producer role on any future films, if he was going to be involved at all. So at that time, 2017, it seemed like the DCEU was pretty dead. We're getting Wonder Woman 2, we were getting Aquaman, but the Snyder version of it was pretty dead. Until, actually not really until, because pretty much immediately after the release, fans of the DCEU were asking for the release of the Snyder Cut, the original film that Snyder had envisioned. Fans took to Twitter, billboards, letter writing, flying banners. They took to a number of different ways to try to convince Warner Media to release it, especially after a buyout and restructuring of the company. They're like, this is the chance. Maybe we'll be able to get it. But as of late 2019, people within the company were still like, it's not going to happen, right? But then a few things happened kind of concurrently that really led to this possibility. So we had 1, the fan demand. We had 2, the releasing of Warner Brothers' new streaming service, HBO Max, that was just premiering and they needed content for. And number 3, coronavirus. We were all waiting for it, coronavirus. When basically the entire industry shut down and the only work that could be done was visual effect and 3D work. Because remember, Snyder basically had a version of the film done just without VFX. Maybe a couple reshoots here and there, but it was almost there. So at some point, Warner Bros. Kind of had to figure out, well, we have this thing that people are clamoring for sitting on the shelf. We just kind of need to finish it up a little bit, and we can promote our new our new streaming service all in one. And so Warner decided the Snyder Cut lives. And March 21, it was released. A 4-hour film that, having seen it, it's not bad. It's pretty good. It's much better than the Whedon version. So, yeah, win for artistic integrity, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you have a vision, stick to it, and people will reward you.
Yeah.
Except, no, I don't really think that.
Oh.
Because there's been a lot of talk about, is this going to really lead in the industry to a move towards, you know, more prominent director's cuts, or more like bring back of films that were basically scraps? Like, think about Solo, Star Wars story, where Lord and Miller were originally directing it. I think they said they shot around like 90% before they got fired by Kathleen Kennedy, and they brought in Ron Howard. But I'm very, very much on the side of this isn't going to happen again. This is kind of a one-time thing. I don't think this is a win for artistic integrity. I think this was purely economic. Yeah. You know, Warner Brothers had a streaming service to support. They had enough fan demand, and they just couldn't make anything else at the time. Right. Unless we have another worldwide pandemic that entirely stops film production. Or some wood. I need some knock. You know, I don't think that there's going to be another stars aligning that are going to lead to something like this that'll happen again. And it's funny because I read a piece on CNN that was saying how this is such a win for artistic integrity, except CNN is owned by Warner Media, which they even say in the article because they have to. And like, just because you said it doesn't mean that I don't feel like this is a puff piece.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah.
Do you feel like the fact that it's happened is just going to encourage the public more, and then eventually that becomes an economic matter? Because if there's a lot of public demand, you're only hurting yourself economically by not doing it.
I don't think there's enough films that are in this situation that it would attract new viewers. By which I mean, like, so let's say if we go with the Solo example, the Star Wars crowd is already subscribed to Disney Plus. Why? Because they made The Mandalorian, which was fresh, new content that everybody loved. And, you know, even though the Snyder Cut's out there, people don't love it. Like, everyone likes it. But Mandalorian was acclaimed. You know, it innovated new technologies. I don't think there's another example where that's going to happen again. I also just don't think it had the same impact, because this is almost reminding me of, remember the Super Bowl a couple years ago when they Netflix dropped a commercial for Cloverfield something or the other?
Yeah, I remember.
And said, hey, go watch the film right after this. Yeah. And everyone was like, that's crazy. I've never heard of something like that. I could go watch right after this. And then nobody ever did it again. Yep. No one ever talked about it again. It was never as successful. You know, to me, this is falling into the category of gimmick, really. And I'm not a fan of how it's being touted as just a win for artists, a win for artistic integrity, because, you know, this is very, very much related to a capitalist system where they were like, we're in an extreme circumstance. This is what's going to work right now. I don't think we'll ever be in such a perfect place for this to happen again. Also, the reshoot, the VFX and reshoots cost $70 million.
Oh my god!
So Warner Brothers kind of bet big on this, and we actually don't know if it's going to pan out.
Yeah.
Long term.
Wow.
Okay, so as a follow-up, do you think then that a related phenomenon might happen, which I think is more likely, which is not like asking for like reshoots or earlier versions of things, which is fan demand for like totally remaking films completely. Like, and I think the logical thing that would occur when first would be Star Wars with the sequel trilogy.
Oh, interesting. Like just completely like throw Rise of Skywalker, try again.
Yeah, well, or just the entire sequel trilogy.
Entire yes. See, I like The Last Jedi. Eviscerate me, but yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know if we've ever seen such just a throwing away of canon, essentially.
Mm.
Because Justice League 2017 in the DC Extended Universe is still canon. Zack Snyder's cut is not. Like, we don't have... Actually, that's not true. The Incredible Hulk. But that was early. That was early. Ever since then, we haven't really had such a massive throwaway of a part of a franchise. And to redo the entire sequel trilogy would be taking that a step even further. I'd like to see it. But I as much as the Star Wars movies I didn't like them that much, they made the money they needed to make. Rise of Skywalker is still one of the biggest box offices of all time. Until I think there's an extenuating circumstance that makes it monetarily make sense, it's not going to happen. And as much as the fans didn't like Star Wars sequels, I don't see it being big enough to try that again. Yeah. At least for 30 years. After 30 years, maybe, Yeah. We'll see.
Well, the Star Wars purist in me says that there was that whole erasure of canon, right? When Disney bought Star Wars, they erased the EU, which technically you could argue that's not canon, but everyone considers it canon. And, it's a varying quality, but like they should have the sequel trilogy should just made the Thrawn trilogy of books into the movies, and that would have been so much better. But that's the Star Wars purist in me talking.
Oh no, I mean that's also fair, and that's a good thing to bring up here. Especially because I think it's interesting that Star Wars as a canon, to my understanding, started with movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas throwing away of canon of books is just what Marvel and DC do if it's the source material. Like Marvel and DC, they barely base anything on like actual comic books. It's all very loose. But they've never thrown away a film. Mm-hmm. And it almost feels like there's a certain importance to it being a film as opposed to the other art forms, which is not my favorite. But, when you think about monetary investment, it starts to make more sense.
Yeah.
Because, once again, we have to put this entire conversation in context of sort of what we're talking about before, the free market and what is going to make money.
Yeah.
That's what this all is. It's not like I said, it's not a win for artistic integrity.
Yeah.
It's a win for Warner Brothers. Hopefully. Yeah, that's what they're hoping.
Yeah, and then you add to the fact that it's like, some gigantic corporation that's kind of like, they're mad, but like, they're not going to be punished for not trusting their original artist, like, not properly like they should be. For if Lionsgate did the same thing, they might be thinking about bankruptcy the next month, and that's the unfortunate reality of the current landscape is a bunch of monopolies that are invulnerable from their mistakes. So
let's remake the latter half of the Hunger Games series. Let's do it, Lionsgate. I believe in you.
Lionsgate has been trying. I think they've been trying all the wrong way, but they've been trying.
Solid effort here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so is that it for Justice League? Because I was completely unaware that I'm surprised that I didn't hear about the thing that sticks out the most to me, which is the crappiest thing of it all, was that the guy was grieving Then you took his film away from him. And Joss Whedon was also heartless enough to not have any reverence for what he was working. I didn't hear any of this before. It's kind of.
I mean, as much as I'm trashing Joss Whedon, I don't quite want to say it's heartlessness because he was hired for a job, right? And it's tragic what happened, but nobody really expected that. And having seen the movie, I get why Warner Brothers didn't release it. It is 4 hours long, and if you cut it down, it would make no sense. Reshoots had to happen. To the extent that Joss Whedon did, I don't think so. And that might be where your argument here is lying. That was it disrespectful of Joss Whedon to do such an extensive job, but also he was hired and brought on to do something that he was originally going to be with Zack Snyder, of making the movie lighter and of making the story leaner. And that is what he did. As much as I don't like the final product, he did that successfully.
So it is the studio being just terrible.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, they took a bet and it didn't work, and shame on them, because now they have this on their record as well too. That people won't completely dissociate with them.
Yeah.
People who do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre, and I'm very curious to see how it's about to play out in the next 15 years. Will HBO Max still be around? Will this have been a PR move that worked, or will this be another hit to Warner Brothers, who's now like one of 4 studios?
Yeah.
And as much as I don't like what they did, I would be sad to see Warner Brothers go, because that means that all we have is Disney.
Yeah.
What are they even? Disney, Paramount, Universal. Oh, I should know that. My girlfriend works there. And then the streaming services. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. And Paramount is even arguable, because they've been on the edge of bankruptcy for a while now. Yeah,
they're right down the street to me, and they haven't put out much. All these. Oh, and Columbia. Sorry, and Sony Columbia. Who's also questionable.
Sony and Columbia make some interesting films.
Yeah.
Basically, we're just looking at Disney and Universal.
Yeah, Disney and Universal really just, they're it. I mean, aside from streaming services, the streaming services independent of one of those studios, which is really only Netflix and Amazon, because Hulu is owned by Disney. So that's what 6, 7 overall major content producers right now.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we've had. I'm looking at the Twitch view counter. It says 34. Now it's not 34 now, it's 1, which is me. But but at some point, I don't know if we had a lot of people watching and I didn't notice. But hey, that's pretty cool. I don't know when they were watching either. But and there was also one person on YouTube other than, I think, me and Daniel, because I think Daniel's on the stream.
I had it on for a few minutes while I was driving, listening to it.
Oh, okay. So. Maybe it's me and Nathan. Maybe Nathan's watching in the background. But we had one other person on the YouTube stream at some point. Maybe it was Ben. Lol.
Probably.
But hey, this has been fun. But now it's Ben's turn to speak to our lovely audience.
Yeah.
Do you want to just save it for next week, or should I just go?
We can also save it for next week, because we've gone on really long.
Yeah, it might be better just to save it, but.
Yeah, I'm going to also have a terrible time editing this if we go on for another hour. So.
Also,
yeah.
Side note, Irving, you know what I just got a notification about?
A trash fire?
No, but I'm sure I've gotten one of those. I wasn't paying attention to that. I'm filtering them out.
Yeah.
The Komodo's in, apparently. So I got to go get
Congrats.
it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congrats. Well, I guess then, do you want to go over news or do we want to just cut it? Because I don't have any like terribly interesting news personally. I actually don't even remember what I was going to say. I have to look at it. But do you guys have anything you want to share with our viewers?
Warner Brothers goes out of business after 100 years. I'm just forecasting, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can say what I was going to say, but for the news, if you want me, I can do that. Maybe my contribution for like 2 minutes here.
Go ahead.
All right. So, the two things that I wanted to highlight from this week in the media music world is Disney has released first track from Falcon Winter Soldier. It's an early release. I haven't seen the show, but I did listen to the track, so I thought it was kind of an interesting thing. It's an interesting move to try and maybe at least the end credits first, I guess, to try and get people to be interested in listening to the soundtrack.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, nothing special, like every other Marvel piece of work out there.
Trash, I mean, sorry.
Trash.
You know what? I'm not gonna say that, but it sounds like Marvel.
Yeah.
But if you're interested, you can check that out. And then John Williams announced, or he didn't announce. Gloria Chang, the pianist of whom he's writing, announced that John Williams is writing a piece for her to premiere. Prelude and Scherzo for piano and orchestra. She's a pianist who's worked closely with him before. So that's interesting because I kind of assumed John Williams, after Rise of Skywalker, at his age, he's kind of done with composing, and he's probably done with media composing, but it's interesting to see that he's still, put something out. So
yeah, that is really cool. Yeah, I expected him to be done too. He seemed kind of done with it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on a higher note than Rise of Skywalker, though. You can't end there.
Yeah, exactly.
I know it's. I feel bad for him that's how it ended. So I'd be interested in hear this piece when it comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Marvel, I was thinking. I've been debating with Steph, my wife, or the people who are watching. I was debating with her whether it would be worthwhile for a maybe next episode or whatever I get the chance to torture myself with watching Wanda-Vision so I can give my hot take on it.
No, WandaVision's really good.
I've only heard good things about it.
I really like WandaVision.
I watched one episode of it and I kind of wanted to die. Like it was like one of the worst experiences I had watching a television episode.
What didn't you like about it?
I was the episode was like was it the 90s?
The 50s one, or the 90s?
No, I watched it in the middle of I didn't watch it. Someone was playing it, random context, and then I was watching alongside with them, and I watched the 90s one, and it was a hot trash, in my opinion.
That's a terrible place to start. No, you got to start at the beginning. See, the reason why I think WandaVision was something that really impressed me was that it was very contained storytelling after what Marvel's done before. And it's actually sort of a good, unlike what I think a lot of Marvel does, it actually deals with interesting ideas and how do you process trauma is basically just the premise of the entire show. And I thought it handled it really, really well. And I mean, maybe it's just because there's a low bar for Marvel, but I was genuinely impressed with how they pulled it off. And I also know that showrunner right now is super hot. People are trying to hire her immediately because of the show's success. No, I recommend starting from the beginning. It's
The 90s episode I watched was I actually felt embarrassed for cinema. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah. I really wouldn't have started there. Yeah.
That's how much I disliked it. I was actually frustrated in my room, why?
Fascinating. I can't remember what happens in that episode.
It's just a bunch of that old mockumentary style, oh, okay, not old, I guess it still exists, The Office kind of
Oh, that was the 2000s one. Yeah.
Oh, it was the 2000s one. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And
that's a really weird episode to start.
Oh man, I was just do you even understand why that camera work is effective? No, you don't. You're just doing it. That's what really bugged me. And then I just didn't believe any of the emotional anything. It was just so maybe it's because I didn't start at the beginning, but I just it felt so sanitary. I was just this is not compelling at all. I just don't care.
I would recommend starting from the beginning. I understand from that episode how you got there. And I do think there's a valid critique in it about not entirely paying homage to what they're trying to pay homage to. They kind of go halfway on a few episodes, and I think that one was one of them. And there is an in-universe explanation for that, but that's not for me an excuse for sort of them half-assing certain episodes. But I do think you should start from the beginning, because I think it gets somewhere that I very much thought was impressive for Marvel, and maybe that's a big qualification, but I also enjoyed it.
Okay, yeah. Maybe that will convince me to entertain it for the next episode, and you'll know if I hate it. So
that's true. Also, Ben, there's some kind of interesting musical stuff in terms of. This is probably not a credit to the series, but they got the songwriters from the Frozen series to do a new opening every week, going through the eras of sitcom music. Now, I'm not nearly well informed enough to know if it was any good, but other people seem informed.
Who's the general composer for it?
That I'm not sure about. I don't think I was very taken by the actual score of the series, but yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'll end the stream with a few of the housekeeping stuff that I need to do every single time. And that is reminding you that if you are watching, I don't see anyone watching now, but if you are watching, like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitch. We stream every Friday at 7 p.m. We like bringing guests on like Daniel, and we like having these fun conversations. I'm sure Daniel will be back at some point or another.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, just remember that the link is on the screen. Oh, I'm going to fail at pointing at it again. Something like that. Or another.
No, that way.
There's a link on the screen right now below the Justice League picture to where you can find our social media pages and where you will find the stream. It will be completely unlisted automatically on YouTube, meaning you won't be able to access it anymore. So if you hopped on late or anything like that, you have to be on mixedmedia.locals.com. The link is also in the link on the screen. There's a link to it there. And there you'll find a link to the unlisted YouTube video where you can go back and watch the raw stream. Other than that, if you're hearing this, you're probably hearing it on Sunday, which is when these come out in full and I do the cleanup work. And if you really appreciate my cleanup work and the work that we put into this and the fact that we still had some issues earlier today, but we're slowly getting there with the production value. We're still got a lot of beautification to do, a lot of assets to upload, gotta get flashier and all this stuff. But if you want to support us and help us out, following us more than anything, not more than money, nothing, just sharing and following is going to be the best thing you could do for us. And we appreciate you stopping in to Mixed Media. So with that, bye.
Bye.